week 7 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few defenses and DSTs I would drop this week. The first one, the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys, they've been pretty decent so far this season for fantasy football, but they're still a team that gives up a lot of points on the scoreboard and a lot of yards to teams. But this team comes up with a big turnover, it seems like, each and every week is this Cowboy DST. But this week they're on bye in week 7. Then week 8, a tough matchup at the Minnesota Vikings that obviously could score the football with anybody. So right now, Dallas, they won't be worthy of a fantasy start, in my opinion, in at least the next 2 weeks here. And right now, with them on a bye week and then with the tough matchup in week 8, even though they've gone out there and made plays, they're a DST to drop this week, in my opinion. The next DST defense I would drop this week is the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals were a one-time thing here for a good matchup they definitely had versus the Detroit Lions in week 6, where they gave up 11 points, only a sack and interception, and a 4th down stop if you play it. But week 7 here, it's a tough matchup at the Baltimore Ravens that obviously, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, is one of the best teams in all the National Football League here. 5-1 on the season, and Lamar Jackson and this offense, they just make things happen. So the Cincinnati Bengals were added in 40% of fantasy leagues coming into the week here. But now they're droppable once again with the tough matchup in Baltimore. And week 8, if you really want to stash them and keep them, they got a great matchup at the New York Jets that give up the most fantasy points to DSTs. But right now, this week, they're not going to be worthy versus Baltimore. And I don't think many people want to stash a few defenses on their bench, especially with the bye weeks in play. So Cincinnati is a drop, and the third and final defense I would drop this week's the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns, they pretty much haven't been that good for fantasy aspect of things here on the defensive side of things. The last couple games here, they've just been getting torched through the air, giving up tons of points. Week 5 at the Chargers, 47 points allowed, 2 sacks and a fumble recovery. And week 6 versus Arizona, 37 points allowed and 2 sacks. So right here, they've gotten negative fantasy points over the last couple weeks. In week 7, it's a decent matchup versus the Denver Broncos, who aren't the greatest of offenses. But right now, the Browns, they're getting torched, like I mentioned. Their whole team is in disarray now, especially on offense as well, with the injuries to Baker, who's not 100%, even though he should play in Thursday night's ball game. Odell Beckham, he didn't look 100% in week 6 after hurting that shoulder. And now Kareem Hunt's out 4 to 6 weeks as well. So right here, this offense, once again, might put this defense in some bad positions of field position. And right here, it's just a defense that's not producing or getting the job done, especially like I mentioned in the last 2 weeks here. And in my opinion, I don't know how they're still owned in 58% of fantasy leagues. They're an easy drop is the Browns until we see them getting things going. So that's a few defense and DSTs I would drop here in week 7 of the fantasy football season.